I just wanted to tell you that I'm not the character I'm playing because I don't have. I'm not that bad as a person.
We love a self-aware king.
I'd like to know what do you think about the movie?
Well, if you insist. Hi everyone, it's Lady Genevieve. If you are one of the people that is waiting for my Knives Out video, I am currently on page 17 of my script and still writing. I've got 2 more sections left to go and then I will record it. But today, we are going to be talking about a new Netflix release that has taken the world by the neck. Oof, we are in for a long one. I had no idea what 365 days was. Things get big on Netflix all the time, and I can still manage to stay none the wiser about them because the platform is so oversaturated with content that it's impossible to keep up with all of it. But KennieJD made a video roasting 365 days just as it deserves. She is hilarious. I've been watching her channel ever since she first started her Bad Movies and a Beat series, and I tune in every Saturday to watch. I'm going to link her video in my description box because she gives a great rundown of what happens in the film if you have not already seen it, or even if you have seen it and you would just like to see it get dragged by the neck. I knew 365 days was going to be bad because I watched her video, but the way she described it made it seem so exceptionally ridiculous that my curiosity got the better of me, which really says something because I have watched her roast so many things, but it does not usually result in me wanting to go watch the thing that she has roasted. But now, I've seen 365 days. And I can never unsee it. Afterwards, I looked up Michele Morrone's Instagram because I had never heard of him, and I wanted to see if he was a big name actor in Italy. As it turns out, this film is his biggest break to date, and something about watching this man say that he's not a bad guy like his character, and calling for feedback about the film made me snap. He seems like a nice person, but this film is a disaster on so many levels. I don't want to do just a regular review. What I want to do today is break this video up into 3 sections. The first section is going to be about consent. 13 Reasons Why had all these disclaimers added after its release because of how dangerous and harmful the material is, and Netflix only bothered to add them because they got a ton of backlash for being completely irresponsible by allowing that garbage onto their platform. It's a problem that 365 Days doesn't have similar disclaimers, though realistically it just shouldn't have been made the way that it was in the first place because it romanticizes a complete disregard for consent, and that needs to be addressed, so I will address it. The second part of this video will be about the plot, or lack thereof. Where is the story? Did it get kidnapped too, and that's why it didn't show up? Then the third and final part I want to do is workshop the story and film. It would be very easy to come on here and just drag it for being problematic, poorly executed trash, but for the sake of Michele Morrone asking oh so nicely, I'm going to turn this into a teachable moment. You're welcome. 365 Days is based on the first book of a Polish trilogy of erotic romance novels. While I cannot truly speak to the original source material since I don't speak Polish, I did find some translated excerpts written up by fans when I went looking for information about the books to get a sense of how close of an adaptation it was from print to live action. While I do enjoy watching YouTube reviews that roast these types of erotic works of fiction that tend to have bad writing, it's genuinely alarming to me that this particular film has been as successful as it has. On the one hand, I have seen plenty of comments from people that say things like, "This film is so bad, but the actor is so hot." And I have no problem with that line of feedback. However, it concerns me to see other people talk about the film like it's something romantic. So, ladies and gentlefolks, let's talk about consent. I want to be very clear in explaining how abundant the infractions are in this film. It has bad storytelling in general, but they're also putting out a very dangerous narrative because there are plenty of young people that can watch something like this and think that just because Michele Morrone is hot, that this is the type of behavior they should put up with from a romantic partner, which is absolutely not what you should do. Michele Morrone plays the male lead, Massimo Torricelli. I am old enough that it took me a while to acclimate to the fact that his character was called Massimo, because when I hear the name Massimo, I think of J-Lo's dopey love interest in The Wedding Planner. You Gen Z kids probably won't understand that reference, but that is a rom-com where J-Lo hates the color teal, Olivia Newton-John's I Honestly Love You, and Matthew McConaughey gets a statue's bollocks accidentally superglued to his hand. Listen, the early 2000s were weird sometimes. Massimo kidnaps a woman he's obsessed with and tells her that she has to stay with him for 365 days. That's where the title comes from, and that if she hasn't fallen in love with him by the time those 365 days are up, he will let her go. If the kidnapping wasn't bad enough, he also repeatedly assaults her, and the film tries to make it seem like it's romantic. No, assault is not romantic. Stop it, electric chair. One of the main reasons why the film has gotten so much attention is because of how graphic and over the top the depictions of physical intimacy are. Now, I want to make it very clear here that on principle alone, graphic and over the top physical intimacy does not bother me. What I will say though, in regards to this film specifically, is that the fact that he spit on her, you know where, was so baffling. What was the reason? You are far too rich and too much of a freak to not have lube on your boat. Right from the jump, Massimo is excessively physically aggressive with women. I don't know why the powers that be deemed it necessary to include close-ups of him grunting while he's forcing himself into a flight attendant's mouth. This part was something that I was able to find a translation of from the book, and as bad as it was in the film, it was so much worse in the source material. First of all, in both versions, it's straight up assault. The film tries to play it off like she derived some sort of enjoyment from it, but no reasonable, mature person is going to watch that encounter and think that it was consensual or enjoyable for her. But in the source material, he was even more physically aggressive, and you're getting his train of thought while he's assaulting this flight attendant, and it was so bad that it made me want to throw him into a volcano. Moving ahead to when he meets his love interest, Laura, he has her drugged and kidnapped because he's obsessed with her and wants her to fall in love with him, and is persistently physically aggressive with her.
I won't do anything without your permission.
First of all, Massimo is a kidnapper, so you're asking a lot of the audience to trust him, let alone romanticize him. But when you try to have him claim that he cares about consent when he's literally in the middle of groping her, that is certainly a choice. You don't know each other, hello? Massimo repeatedly touches her without her permission. Let me try to present some examples of this without getting in trouble from the automated systems on this platform. He goes into her changing room when she's trying on lingerie and then refuses to leave when she tells him to and chokes her. He does that a lot. If you're consenting to that type of roughhousing, then fine, I don't care. But she never agreed to those types of shenanigans, so that's gonna be a big yikes from me. The shower encounter is another hodgepodge of zero consent, and since I cannot play the clip because it's got music playing over it and I'm not about to get claimed by music labels, gross, so I get to have the displeasure of reciting the dialogue he says to her.
Baby girl.
Ugh, I hate when he says that.
When your entire life is based on taking everything with force, it's hard to react in a different way, especially if someone is taking away a pleasure you really desire.
Ooh, do you know who talks like that? Abusers. I hate it.
But don't provoke me. I can't be gentle. I'm not used to tolerating disobedience. I'm so grateful that you're alive, but at the same time I want to kill you.
He has her dragged onto a plane against her will, which is sort of like kidnapping Inception, since she's already kidnapped and yet is still getting kidnapped again. When on the plane, he has her tied up. That's so weird. What did he say when he first explained to her the terms of this kidnapping?
I won't tie you up.
And that's not the only time he ties her up, but just wait a moment, we'll get to that. So when she's tied up on this plane, let me choose my words very carefully here. He rubs and pinches a very particular part of her upper body over her clothes, and then sticks his hand down her trousers. What, you didn't think that they could pull a, well, that escalated quickly, within the confines of a Stockholm Syndrome romanticizing car crash of a relationship? As a matter of fact, they can, they did, and guess what? It gets worse. Remember how he said he wouldn't tie her up, and then he tied her up? Well, he ties her up again, on a bed, wrists and ankles bound, because the writers of these messy erotic stories only include BDSM to be dramatic and problematic, instead of incorporating that sort of thing in an intelligent or thoughtful way. And then he forces her to watch him be serviced by another woman, except this time she's not a flight attendant. And then after he's finished, he gropes Laura while she's still tied up and has not given him any permission. And as terrible as all of that is, the fact that they go out of their way to try to have her act like it's some sort of ambiguous, conflicted situation for her, like she might be kind of into it, is what really gets under my skin. It's insulting to everyone, not just women, to have a depiction of assault and make it seem as though the victim might be kind of into it. Jail, prison, guillotine, the Phantom Zone. I've seen some claims floating around that the story might have drawn some inspiration from Beauty and the Beast. Regardless of whether or not it's true, that is not an ideal source to draw inspiration from. In Beauty and the Beast, Belle agreed to trade herself into captivity to save her father. There is already a case to be made about how it's not a good idea to have a love story be born from such a significant power disparity involving indentured servitude, but at least with Beauty and the Beast, you can still kind of make a case for how Belle had some agency as a character by deciding to live with the Beast in the first place. 365 Days removes any ounce of that nuance by having Massimo drug and kidnap his love interest. It's bad enough that stories like this have ever existed, but the fact that we are living in a post-Me Too world and a story like this can still get commissioned on such a large platform is an insult to all of the brave people that have come forward to share their stories as a part of that movement. If you want to show characters being rough as they mess around with each other, that's fine. If you want to have some type of coercion or exploitation in a fictional story, you can do that, but there needs to be a bigger point to make. Don't just use that sort of dynamic as a cheap tactic to stir up drama and conflict, especially in a romance. If you want the dynamic to be romantic to the audience, they need to be on the same page, and consent needs to be considered. It doesn't mean everything always needs to be fluffy and vanilla. Mr. and Mrs. Smith had their protagonists hooking up while destroying their house, but they were both badass spies with an incredible ability to destroy objects or people, and the context was completely different. The disregard for consent is the issue here, not the fact that the content is explicit. Is the physical intimacy in 365 Days over the top and self-indulgent? Yes, but do you know what else is over the top and self-indulgent? Every bland action star that walks away from an explosion in slow motion. Even if smut and eye candy are a film's largest selling points, that doesn't mean you should neglect the story. There's a total lack of plot in 365 Days, and not even a 4-minute long uninterrupted montage of hooking up on every flat surface of a giant boat can make up for the fact that absolutely nothing interesting happens in this story. There are so many gaping plot holes that the film feels more like a series of random PWP recipes from Wattpad thrown together and acted out by the same actors with no proper care to create a coherent narrative across them, or any interesting character arcs. When the film first starts and we're introduced to Massimo and his father, this is supposed to be some big tragic origin story. Massimo's dad gets shot and killed, and in the process that same bullet hits Massimo. However, this little mafia meeting they're having is in the middle of nowhere. They are on an island in the Mediterranean Sea, and when they pan out you can see they are on top of a giant building with nothing and no one else around. So who shot them? Was it the men Massimo's father was meeting with? Then wouldn't his men have shot back in retaliation so we would see more dead bodies? Where on earth is a shooter supposed to hide? You are not meeting on a rooftop in a big city where a sniper can hide in or on top of another building. There is nowhere for a shooter to hide out here. They're not in a chopper, we would have seen that in the sky, and so would they. Even if you don't get an answer about this shooting right when it happens, you would expect that there would be some revelations about it later on in the film. But nope, you get nothing of the sort. Next up, we have Laura, who realistically should probably be called Yen, not because she's money, but because the way she's written in this film makes her nothing more than a YN. Some of you might be wondering, what's a YN? There is a style of writing in fanfiction where the author does not give their protagonist a name. If you don't read fanfiction, you might be thinking, what? That's super weird. Why would you do that? YN stands for your name. So when you read the story, you are able to conveniently insert yourself into it. In a lot of these types of self-insert fanfictions, even if you give the protagonist a name, there's a general tendency to have a lack of character and personality in the protagonist, so they can serve as a blank slate for readers to place themselves in the story, and by extension, into the romance with whomever you wrote the fanfiction about. When I tried to find information about the book, the impression that I got was that for as lacking as the source material may have been, there was also a failure to properly communicate things about this character, Laura, in the film that were explained in the book. For starters, when Laura tries to hook up with her boyfriend and he turns her down, in the original book this is supposed to be a recurring problem for them. They are physically incompatible because she wants to do it every day. Him, not so much. Additionally, Laura is supposed to have quit her job already and be suffering from burnout. She is lost in knowing what she wants to do with her life. They didn't get into any of that in the film. Who is Laura in this film? What does she want from her life? Does she have goals, professional or otherwise?
I didn't know you have a heart problem.
Ah, yes, the vague heart condition that has no name and no clear symptoms except for the odd bit of fainting when it's convenient for the plot. Don't introduce a heart condition in your main character if it's not going to lead to a major health incident at some point in the story, most likely in your climax or conclusion. This should be storytelling 101. Also, how is getting kidnapped supposed to be a conducive environment for a woman with a heart condition? Not to mention the marathon rounds of romping around a boat. Convenient how none of that sets off her heart condition. Why is that? Oh, right, because bad writing. Forget about continuity. Massimo is a Don, a big old mafia boss. Do we ever get to learn anything interesting about that? No. Do we get to see any big action sequences? Also no. We don't even get to see him shoot the guy who tried to assault Laura at the club. We only hear about what he does after the fact. How am I supposed to buy him as a mafia don when the only person he ever assaults is Laura, and more or less every other woman he comes into contact with? He kills one person in his organization, and the drama isn't even about the murder. It's about the fact that Laura saw him do the murder, and then she fainted because of that unnamed heart condition that never comes up again. That is the last time we ever see her faint. We don't see her take any medication for her heart either. What, did she just need Massimo to swing his pipe around and now she's cured? That's odd. Never heard about that remedy for heart problems before.
Bratwurst? Aren't we the optimist?
There are so many things in this film that just don't make sense, and I need to purge this from my system So I'm going to share some of these examples. If you think some of these are too petty to warrant mentioning, then go make your own review of the film where you can discuss or omit whatever you choose. When they have their shower confrontation, where are the products? There is no shampoo, body wash, conditioner, no shower towel to scrub your back with. Lauda just stands there under the water, washing nothing. She's just lazily moving her hands around a little bit. That won't make you clean. Where is the soap? Just because you want to be nasty with your man does not mean you can't exfoliate yourself in between boat marathons. Disgusting. Disgusting! Why does she decide to go splash around in a fountain, but we don't even get to see her in the fountain? Your location scouts couldn't be bothered to find a fountain in Italy? Don't you come at me with your excuses. Serve me a fountain. When she goes to his hotel room after the fountain incident to tease him, because teasing your kidnapper is a totally logical thing to do, how does she get locked in? You are inside the room. That's not how locks work. Not to mention he ties her up and decides he's gonna show her what she's missing out on. And he has this girl come out. Where did she come from? If the door was locked, how did she get inside the room? Do you have a secret panel in your hotel doorway where you hide women to emerge for the sake of a dramatic entrance? Then, after this encounter, she decides she's gonna make him jealous by dressing in a shockingly revealing dress. First of all, his reaction is to slut-shame her, and he does that more than once in the film, by the way.
I wouldn't have to do it if you didn't dress like a whore and put on your little show.
But this dress she wears is not even revealing, and to try to make it seem like it's a really shocking dress, they have all these other people at the club, the extras, dressed in absurdly conservative clothing. If you've ever been to a club, plenty of girls will dress like Lauda. Not to mention, she was already wearing a more revealing dress than this earlier in the film. There is no climax in this story. Well, at least on a storytelling level. Lauda has no significant character breakthrough because you don't learn anything about her. Massimo asks Lauda to teach him to be gentle, but as we saw in the rigorous boat montage, there was none of that. She taught him nothing of the sort. We are expected to buy into her falling in love with him before the 365 days are up, without showing anything meaningful to facilitate or legitimize that type of connection between them. They just hooked up a bunch. Okay, and there is never any major mafia action, and the threats to these two main characters never felt real, including the ones Massimo's ex made against Lauda, which they don't even really talk about. They just go hook up in a bathroom. Great way to address a death threat. He sends her back to Poland. He tracks her back down in Poland. They hook up again, and he just says that he's dealt with the threat now. Even if the book had been lacking when it came to fleshing out the mafia action, it's just laziness for you to not take creative liberties with the material when adapting it. This brings us to part 3. I don't know who decided this combination of non-existent plot, dull characters, and an excessive amount of salacious content with songs being played very loudly over the top of them was necessary, let alone to put it on Netflix. But one Instagram live by a very likable Italian later, and off I went to brainstorm a review. Once I started thinking more in depth about the material and the points that I would want to make when discussing it, the ideas started coming very quickly. When I say I want to workshop this script, I am presenting ways to work with the pieces of what they already had in mind with the original story. The point is not to just delete it all and start from scratch, no matter how tempting that might be. The point is to salvage what the story is based on what it's trying to do. The main things the story seems to be pushing are a Polish woman falling in love with a Sicilian mobster, and there's going to be a lot of salacious content along the way. Fair enough, let's keep that. My understanding from the Googling I was doing was that the book was at least partially inspired by 50 Shades. Listen, I'm not a miracle worker. That whole series has an abusive relationship and a very inaccurate, problematic depiction of BDSM. I am not an expert on BDSM, but when that trilogy was at the peak of its media exposure, there was a lot of discourse about it where members of the BDSM community were writing and getting interviewed for articles, and they explained a lot more about why that trilogy completely went against what BDSM actually is. There's plenty of reading material about that if you want a better understanding, but the point is, the main trilogy in the 50 Shades trilogy is an abusive one, and so is the main relationship in 365 Days. So, this idea of wanting your man to be really aggressive and rough is not an interesting enough concept for me to make it the main focal point of my reworked version of this story. Oh, and there's another reason why I don't want to keep this domineering man thing that they've got going on here. When Laura is tied up in the airplane, she berates Massimo in Polish, which he doesn't speak. While doing so, she uses a word that in the English subtitle is written as a slur against Italians. That was all the confirmation I needed to prove that Massimo is written like a really gross stereotype of Italian men. I could have accepted him being a mafia don if you had done something interesting with it, but when you add the physically aggressive behavior and total disregard for consent when it comes to his main love interest and women in general, and then you have the female protagonist calling him a slur, I am prepared to get offended on behalf of all Italians because this is unflattering for no good reason. It is not smart writing, and it's most definitely not romantic. But I'm going to fix that, and so much more. So let's go. The most pressing revision that is needed for this story is to get rid of the gross kidnapped you because I'm obsessed with you dynamic. The aggressive disregard for consent in Massimo as a character makes him completely irredeemable no matter how hot you think Michele Morrone is. So what I would propose is that Massimo does have that vision of Laura when he and his father were shot, but his fixation on her image is just one of the symptoms he has in his unresolved trauma about losing his father in such a violent way right in front of him, and of course his own near-death experience in the process. Also, this encounter needs to happen somewhere that is not in the middle of nowhere. Do it on the mainland so you don't have the gaping plot hole that leaves me wondering where the hell the shooter could have been that shot them.
It's not what I wish for. I had no choice.
This line jumped out at me because I naively thought this was going to lead to some deeper insight into Massimo's character. If he didn't want to go into the family business and become a mafia don, the implication is that he may have had other aspirations. That brings me to that giant painting Massimo had of Laura. So here's my suggestion. Let's make Massimo an artist. Think of how much more romantic it would be if this was something he painted himself instead of just commissioning some other artist to do it. Massimo wanted to be an artist, and that could have been a source of conflict with his father. Dad wants him to go into the family business, and they have an argument about it, but conflict or not, Massimo loves his father, so he goes with dear old daddy to a mafia meeting, and pop down they go. So in the present day story, 5 years after losing his father, Massimo is grappling with the guilt of fighting with his father right before he died, wanting to honor his father's wishes and work on running the family business, or should I say businesses.
I have few companies, hotels, clubs, restaurants.
And he's haunted by the image of a woman he had a vision of when he was dying. All of this is happening on top of the trauma of witnessing his father die violently in front of him and having his own near-death experience. Also, let's have Massimo go to a therapist because I need to see more characters going to therapy. It's time to destigmatize working on your mental health. This would also give the audience the opportunity to get a deeper glimpse into Massimo's inner thoughts and emotions. Think about it. An Italian mobster/artist who is putting the work in to deal with his mental health. You would be giving the audience legitimate reasons to romanticize Massimo as a character instead of just relying on Michele Morrone's looks to carry the entire film. I said what I said.
Vabbè, almeno mi annoierò.
Buona fortuna, Massimo. Qualcuno si è preso il nostro container con la coca.
Invece hai deciso di vendere dei bambini ad un bordello.
365 Days is a film that uses Polish, English, and Italian. In regards to this, my main feedback is that you should have had more Italian. For as lacking I found this film to be when it came to things like plot and character development, the brief moments where Massimo would speak in Italian with his mafia colleagues or his cousin, for a few seconds I could almost trick myself into thinking that I was watching an actual film with an actual story. Oh, what's going on in the world of this organized crime syndicate? And then they would go back to the terrible English dialogue between Massimo and Laura. While we're on that subject...
Are you lost, baby girl? Are you lost, baby girl? Are you lost, baby girl?
Baby girl.
I hate it. I hate it so much. Why would you decide that that was going to be his pet name for her? Maybe this was the result of people spending too much time on Wattpad and they thought that this was how people speak English, but for the most part, grown men do not call the grown woman that they're interested in baby girl. There's no significant age gap here either. Also, he's Italian. Why doesn't he call her Bella or some other Italian term of endearment that I'm not familiar with because I don't speak Italian? That would have, one, made more sense, and two, been actually attractive. It really says something that you can take a man as good looking as Michele Morrone and still he manages to make me go blech because you forced him to say
Baby girl.
Additionally, there were a confusing amount of grammatical errors in Massimo's dialogue. To be fair, Laura's English dialogue also had some issues, but in general, they just kept piling up.
My heart stopped, I saw you.
When my heart stopped, I saw you.
If next year on your birthday nothing changes, I'll set you free.
If next year on your birthday nothing changes, I'll set you free.
I've ordered it. And I'm gonna decide when I'm gonna see it.
I've ordered it, and I'm gonna decide when I'm going to see it.
Why am I here? Who the f you are?
Who the f are you? If you expect us to believe that they're conducting professional business in English, I don't buy that they would make such rudimentary mistakes. They already have accents, and they should keep them. Just get someone who knows English grammar well to proofread your script. You can even hire me for the sequels and I will come sit in Video Village, and if someone messes up their grammar, I'll let you know after you cut that you need to do another take. In general, the story will be reworked to better develop the infrastructure of Massimo's crime family and the larger crime syndicate in the area, and we'll get more tense business meetings and action sequences added into the mix. When Massimo's father had that meeting in the film's opening, he rejected the offer because these men had been trafficking underage girls. We see later on that Massimo kills a man because he too had been involved in trafficking children.
But you have to know that he deserved it. He'd been hurting children, cheating and stealing on his family. We don't forgive it.
This is a great opportunity to explore the gray morality of the way he, and by extension his father, approach being a mafia don. They're involved in other illegal activities like blackmail, extortion, contraband including drugs, but drawing a line when it comes to human trafficking means there's some sort of code of ethics they hold themselves to, and I would like to see it. So you might be wondering where Laura comes in if Massimo is no longer an abusive creep. Well, Massimo has been thinking about her and occasionally painting her for the last 5 years, but he doesn't presume that she's a real person until one day he spots her in Italy and he's shook. Now, Massimo is a man with resources, so he sends his people off to find out who she is. His people gather information into a file for him to look over, but a file can only tell you so much, and his curiosity is piqued. Along the way, he breaks up with Anna, whom he was never really into anyway. He was just using sex as a coping mechanism. So he decides to approach Anna and chat her up. Apparently, in the book, they had chatted a couple of times before he kidnapped her, instead of just the one creepy encounter before he gave the order for her to get snatched up. But Massimo's family has enemies. Usual mafia stuff. rival gangs, fighting over territory, business, and so on and so forth. So when Anna gets broken up with, she's feeling spiteful, so she tips off the rival family, the Gattusos, about how Massimo's got himself a new boo. She knows he's got a fixation because she's seen the paintings and she's a snoop. So despite Massimo's best efforts to get to know Laura organically, he needs to jump into action when the Gattusos try to kidnap her. Sure, she might be reluctant to go live with a man she doesn't know very well, but he seems like her best option for survival since she is not equipped to handle the threat of being targeted by the Gattuso family. And she is attracted to Massimo. They've already been talking before this kidnapping attempt, and she's broken up with her boyfriend because he values her significantly less than his work and his friends, and they're physically incompatible. She needs someone with more passion. In the book, Laura had been a sales director in the hotel industry before she got burned out. I found these translations from the book that I want to share about Laura's passion for work and her consequent burnout that causes her to feel disillusioned. Working in the hotel industry had given me a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and allowed my ego to grow. I felt thrilled every time I had negotiated a large contract, especially when I had won against people who were older and more skilled in the art of negotiation than me. Every victory in those financial battles had given me a sense of superiority and satisfied the vain side of my character. Some may say it's stupid, but for a girl like me, coming from a small town and never finishing her studies, proving myself to everyone around me was a priority. I was overwhelmed with my own despair and my reluctance to work, with no idea of what to do next. My professional life had always influenced my own sense of value. Without a business card in my wallet or a work phone attached to my hip, I felt like I didn't even exist. This is all context that was largely absent in the film adaptation, and that's a wasted opportunity. If we maintain this characterization in my workshop of the script, I would propose that while Laura is staying with Massimo to be under his protection while this feud between the families is picking up momentum, she begins to help him with the business of being a mafia don. She thrives doing business deals and negotiations, and doing so in the context of organized crime could serve as a much-needed jolt to get her out of her slump. He listed all of those businesses he owns, so there would be plenty for her to do. All the while, Massimo and Laura get closer, and you can put in as many over-the-top scenes of them hooking up as you'd like, so long as you don't derail the plot in the process. Here's a suggestion, since Massimo is a painter in my version of this story. They mess around with paint on a giant canvas, and Massimo later puts it up on his wall because he's freaky like that in it. And you've got to do something over the top to get the auntie demographic riled up, since that's presumably who your main target audience is. You might be wondering about the supposed implausibility of Massimo having a vision of a woman while he was dying and that woman turning out to be real. Well, here's my proposal. In the film, Massimo saw Laura dancing around through his binoculars, which also didn't make sense, by the way, because how are you going to go all the way out to a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea to have your secret mafia meeting? But there still happens to be one tourist down below, even though we don't even see any other people on this island except for the ones that are here for this meeting up on this tall building. What I would do instead, to build off my earlier point about doing this meeting somewhere more populated because it fixes the plot hole of there being no realistic place for a secret shooter to have been hiding, Massimo could have been walking through the city and seen Laura on holiday with her friends shortly before going to the meeting. The shooting goes down and he has her face still in his mind because he saw her recently, and the trauma of this experience makes it so he doesn't remember seeing her. If you want to go down the repressed memory path, you can have him remember it because he's going to therapy and he starts talking about that day, Or my preferred option is to have the Torricelli family start digging into the CCTV footage of that neighborhood that day, because over the course of them feuding with the Gattuso family, they start to find incriminating evidence that they were involved in the hit on Massimo's father. Team Torricelli starts looking for footage to see if a member of the Gattuso family was in the area that day, and what do they find? Massimo checking out Laura. The two of them learn that their coupling did not occur because of some mysterious, unexplained conjuring, but simply because of random chance and circumstances beyond their control. But by now, they're in too deep. They've caught real feelings based on actually knowing each other, and not just because of marathon rounds on a boat. Laura's main individual arc would be about getting out of her slump and existential crisis, while Massimo's individual arc would be about addressing the unresolved traumas about losing his father and determining whether he wants to keep going as a mafia don or leave it all behind to be an artist like he wanted before. Both characters would also navigate falling in love, working together to be better at the business dealings intertwined with organized crime, and fighting off the threat from the Gattuso family. I was infuriated when Massimo tracked Laura down in Poland and they were going to hook up again, because what else do they do? And she finds bruising on his chest that I would presume is from getting shot while wearing bulletproof body armor, and all he said when asked about it was, "I solved it." Huh? Solved what? I didn't see you do anything except assault women and swing your pipe around. I didn't bother with trying to decide on any concrete endings for my workshop version of the film because I don't know what's in the sequels, except for the fact that Massimo's got a twin brother, apparently. Michele Morrone, you sweet little angel, if you are going to be doing a twin story, you better serve me the performances of your life. Because twin performances are not a game. Lindsay Lohan? A cultural reset.
Will you stop thinking about your stomach at a time like this? At a time like what?
Hayley Mills, the actual Queen of England.
No. I'm from Boston. Ooh. Boston.
The last few points I would like to add are more to do with technical matters regarding the filmmaking. For one, I hate the score. You're in Italy, with actual Italians speaking Italian. Why does your score sound so cheap and disposable? Use classical music. You could have licensed any classic Italian opera, a lot of operas are in Italian, or some classical symphonies, or you could have had a composer write a classical score. Don't tell me it's not in the budget to get a live orchestra, even if it does sound better, because it does. You could have made it work with samples. Technology has come a long enough way for you to make it work, even if you were working with a limited budget. I don't know what the budget was for this film, so I'm just covering my bases, just in case someone tries to clap back with a, "we didn't have the money." Also, to give credit where credit is due, there is some really nice cinematography in the film. Beautiful shots of these scenic locations, but I was a bit confused by the direction choice to have Massimo mysteriously appear when he's being introduced as a character twice. Stylistically, it feels a bit odd when so much of the film is presented through a more realistic lens, especially when he does it the first time, because he appears mysteriously and disappears immediately afterwards. Where did he go? Did he just say,
"Are you lost, baby girl?"
and then immediately dive into some shrubbery to try to create an air of allure? If you want to go in that stylistic direction, I welcome it. I'm just saying you should have done more of that so it matches across the film and the audience can buy into it properly. Fully implement that style. Throw some Amelie on it while you're at it. If you've not seen Amelie, by the way, you watching this, what are you doing with your life? Remember when Amelie was embarrassed, so she melted into the floor? Peak cinematic content. I have said far more than what's necessary about this softcore Stockholm Syndrome romanticizing mess of a film. If you loved this film unironically and are absolutely outraged that I would dare to have a go at it, don't be. Clearly, I had a fair few issues with it, but I didn't even put this film dead last on my Letterboxd list of 2020 films. I did think about it, but then I remembered Mabel's Don't Call Me Up, which is a song that plays when Lauda goes to the club wearing a bad wig. That song is a bop, so I put 365 Days second to last on my list instead. You've got to give it up to Michele Morrone and his team though, because those business instincts are bang on. Man's got 4 songs on the soundtrack. The opening theme, his song. First shopping montage, also his song. The part where they're in the shower and he grabs her by the neck, that's his song too. We can trash talk this film as much as we like, but Michele is laughing his way to the bank. He could buy himself his own boat now if he wanted one. Acting career, locked. Music career, loaded. Every time I go to his Instagram, he's got another 1 million followers. Seriously, can I be in a terribly written film and become the new rising star? Actually, that strategy would never work for me because I'm not a tall, hot white man with lips and an accent. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like because it really helps out my channel. Subscribe for more content and have a browse through my videos because I post a lot of content about films and television series. I've noticed I'm starting to get into a bit of a habit where I roast bad love stories, bad love interests, and yet somehow I still have not done a video on my nemesis, Danny Zuko. Someday I will destroy him though. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!